So, oddly enough, this week I've gotten about 3 or 4 questions about confidence, which is a interesting area. I love to talk about developmental psychology. I am by no means an expert. Just remember, I'm a junior doctor working in mental health. I'm not the Bible, but I'd love to talk a little bit about how I think about confidence and self-esteem and where it comes from. And then talk a little bit about, one of the questions was about how to improve it. If you're new here, my name's Sil. I'm a junior doctor working in mental health in Australia. I'm on a training program, so I'm by no means a world-renowned expert in anything, but I enjoy making mental health educational videos. Just a reminder that all these videos are for general information only. They're not medical advice. They do not replace you seeking professional medical personal advice. And I'm not representing a workplace or a college in making these videos. They're just my personal opinion. So confidence is an interesting one. You know, we've all seen that person who comes into the room and radiates confidence. There's extroverted confidence and introverted confidence, and there's different ways that confidence is displayed. So, what is it? Well, I guess it's a sense of security in oneself, isn't it? That we are good enough. Where does that sense of security come from? That we are good enough, that level of confidence, and then secondary to that, that ability to kind of talk to strangers and not need to talk to strangers, to be confident in silence and to be comfortable with things. So I've often, I come across as quite a confident person, but I'd probably be quite insecure in a lot of situations. So I've had to work on my confidence and my need for approval and my need for validation and things like that. But where did it all come from? So confidence is basically your self-esteem. And I think the way I think about it is that it all comes from when we are small, our early life experiences. When you are a baby, you are this muddy mix of, existence. You don't really know you exist. You don't really know that you're parents are a separate entity, so you don't really have a self to have self-confidence with. You have to form that self. And the way that you develop that self is by separating from your parents. So that happens physically, when you start to crawl and when you start to walk, you start physically separating and realizing your own individual autonomy. You can start picking up things and you can start breaking things and eventually, hopefully, you can start fixing things that you break. But that's how you start to form the self. Now, there's millions of interactions that occur as you separate from your caregivers. And the nature of those interactions is very important in how we form our sense of self. If when you are separating, you are feeling safe and encouraged, but being contained when things are a bit too dangerous, then you should typically do develop a sense of good self-esteem. But some people either have experiences of neglect where they're ignored, their achievements aren't appreciated when they're young. And by achievements, I mean even learning how to walk, people who have had significant neglect will have a low self-esteem because they haven't had the modeling from their caregivers to build that self-esteem. I'm not saying this is everyone, by the way. I'm just saying this is certain people. So let's talk about that for a second. The way that our caregivers model us helps us form ourselves. Oh, that's a bit messy. Let me try and make that a little easier to understand. Say I fall over as a toddler, and for me it's catastrophic. I am crying beyond containment because I've fallen over and I've hurt my knee. A caregiver that comes and cuddles me and says, it's okay, it's just a little tumble, has then modeled the right response, right? It's to not have a big outburst of emotion and catastrophization and wailing. It's to say, I've had a fall, I'm contained, I'm loved, and it's not a major injury. So I can just, by modeling this kind of expression, I can then down-regulate my baby. So that is building my sense of self-perception. I'm learning to be this person that can, self-regulate. Whereas if I have a fall and there's no one to cuddle me, then I might have a big outburst of emotion, and there's no containment. And depending on one's attachment styles, they either can be very loud or very quiet, and that can really affect how they see themselves, because they haven't had a caregiver model what is an appropriate response, and not had that reassurance that that things are going to be all right, that they're a good kid, and to form that sense of self. So this is all a bit of a ramble, isn't it? Whoops. But it's all to get to the point to say that our sense of self as a little baby, toddler, is where it all starts. As the toddler grows, you realize that their deepest sense of self is really the family unit and the caregivers, and they grow from that. So you can imagine that if you are in an unsafe home where there might be domestic violence, that the core of someone's being can feel very unstable. If you have an unstable home, you'll generally children will have an unstable sense of self, because, and you can see this in experiments, children naturally love to play. That is their way of exploring, their way of learning, and also their way of connecting with other children. But if there is tension in the room, children are just incredibly socially attuned, and their ability to play and grow and learn and build confidence will be significantly impaired. So trauma will affect one's ability to build a strong sense of self and self-esteem. It's important also to note, we're talking from a we're talking from a developmental perspective here. It's important to also talk a bit about the superego and all this. That's a Freudian term around it, but it's our inner voice, our conscience, our what you should be like, because that is a very loud voice when we're talking about confidence, and often that is a version of our parents that we have internalized. I like the expression, we're all just children who have learnt to parent ourselves based on our parents. Sorry, parents, for all the pressure I'm putting on you in this video, but I guess an important side note here is to say it's important not to be perfect. It's just about being good enough. And it's important that children are exposed to tense situations that affect their ability to play, because the world's not perfect, and that is an important way for them to learn how to self-regulate. But anyway, it's about being good enough, and you do need a safe household to develop a sense of self and play. Anyway, that's the side note. What I'm trying to get at is around the superego. So if one has had a caregiver that is particularly negative and critical, that voice does get internalized. And even if they're negative and critical to themselves, so if you have a caregiver who's very self-deprecating and negative, that can get internalized as that can get modeled in the child, and then that can affect their development of their confidence. It's really ingrained in our development where we get our level of confidence from. So if there's trauma or negative criticism, like overwhelming negative criticisms from caregivers, neglect, all these things can really affect one's confidence. And it can be very hard to kind of target that, but that can be a goal in therapy, is to try and understand your narrative and where it came from, where the low confidence came from. Now, that's kind of my spiel of confidence. Sorry, it wasn't very scripted. It's Saturday morning and I've just woken up. So I did my best, all right? So what to do about it? Well, it's tricky, but there are things that can help. There's not going to be a magic pill that fixes things completely, although if there is an undiagnosed illness, say ADHD, for example, and a core part of the low self-esteem has been poor performance in schoolwork, and that person gets treatment and performs well, and their confidence improves, well, actually that can really help improve people's confidence. So not saying low confidence is equivocal to having ADHD, but if there's a mental illness and it gets appropriate treatment, that's a very important part in one being confident and having a good self-esteem. So making sure we treat whatever needs treating, and that's not necessarily with medications, right? That's a holistic biopsychosocial intervention. So that's one thing. But then there's two other things to talk about: relationships and health, physical health. I wanted to talk about for confidence. So in relationships, you want to. It's hard because when someone has been raised seeing unhealthy relationships, they will tend to be attracted to unhealthy partners. I'm using the term unhealthy a bit loosely here, but what I mean is often, unfortunately, if someone has seen a lot of domestic violence in their development, they could end up in domestic violence relationships. And it's horrible. There are a lot of services out there for domestic violence, and maybe I should do a video on that one day. But this video is not about that right now. So good partner selection is is really important, because having it doesn't even have to be romantic partners, but friendships with people who are stable and that you can invest in, that can model you in a healthier way than your caregivers, can be really, really helpful, because they help you see yourself in the light that you should see yourself in, with a bit better confidence if they're a good friend. But be aware of unhealthy friendships, right? Because there are also people who, for their own reasons, are not a good fit for you, who might keep you down, who might have sinister intentions, and who are not going to help your confidence. So you want to try and surround yourself with the right people. The other thing to say is around loving yourself and your body. It's very hard to do that if you haven't had positive early childhood experiences around that. But if you're unhealthy for whatever reason, and that can be that someone is overweight, or it can also be that they're underweight. But finding the kind of physical health interventions that can help the physical health of the body can help then build the mental health. So as a good rule, if your physical health is poor, your mental health will struggle. There's no magic split between the body and the mind. They are intimately connected. So it's important to try and optimize both, really. Then the next thing I wanted to talk about around improving confidence is very CBT-esque. It's about capturing your negative self-talk, trying to identify it, reframing, and developing strategies to reduce it. This is very hard to do just by watching a YouTube video, guys. This is where CBT can be quite helpful, and other therapies can be quite helpful. So if you think that you would benefit from therapy, I encourage you to seek professional advice and input around your goals, because it can be really helpful. And there are a lot of different ways to try and capture negative self-talk and reframe it, and try healthier ways of speaking to yourself. And what I see often is that people with low self-confidence will talk to themselves in a way they would never talk to someone else, right? They're far more critical and harsher on themselves than others. And so learning how to capture and acknowledge that was an unhelpful cognition or thought or self-talk, and then learning what works. There's lots of different strategies, but writing it down, and then writing what you should say or what you would say to a friend, and then aiming that towards yourself. Whatever strategy you're therapist and yourself come up with can be really helpful. There are actually online CBT courses. By the way, for those who don't know, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, it's one of the mainstream psychotherapies available, usually done with a psychologist online or in person. But now there are actually CBT courses that you can do online that are not that expensive. Some might even be free. In Australia, there's like Mood Gym, and I can't remember the others. If you just type in online CBT course, lots of things will come up no matter where you are in the world. Some are free like the Mood Gym is free for Australians, but I think if you're overseas, you have to pay because it's funded by the Australian government or something. So looking into those kind of things can be helpful to build self-esteem. And finally, celebrating your achievements. So, when a toddler learns to walk and doesn't get positive response from caregivers, you can imagine that toddler is not going to learn how to celebrate their achievements when they're doing well later in life. And so that is a common thing in people with poor self-esteem. So when you've achieved something, and usually you'll know because your friends or family will tell you, someone who cares for you will say that's an achievement. Learn how to celebrate that. Do something kind for yourself. Go out to dinner with a friend or a movie or whatever you want to do. But become more comfortable with the sense of what's the word? What I'm trying to say is to become more comfortable with the sense that you've done a good thing, because there can be a lot of shame in doing good things with people who have low confidence, and that can be explored in therapy. So, I think that's probably a good set of tips. I think, addressing physical health and optimizing physical health, which means good sleep, good diet, a bit of exercise and routine. Learning how to capture negative self-talk is the second tip we talked about. So capturing it and then reframing it, and then plus or minus therapy. And that therapy can be online courses like with CBT or in person with a therapist. And then the fourth tip around to enjoy your celebrations too, to really appreciate your wins and giving yourself the acknowledgement you deserve. All right, guys. Well, I have finished my cup of tea and it is cold now. But I think that's pretty good for this video. It's good enough. And that's the attitude. It's all about being good enough with confidence. And I feel like this video was good enough for a Saturday morning unscripted chat. So look, if you have any other tips on what I should talk about when thinking about confidence and what you found has been helpful for you addressing poor self-confidence, please comment down below, because people love reading those comments, and those insights can be really helpful. If you want to support my channel, the best thing you can do is like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That really helps me personally. And if you want to support the channel even more, you can become a member, but that's up to you. And I think I'll just leave it there, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. All right, bye for now.